There is a version of you, which is the unbreakable, which is what you want to be.
Timothy Armoo, the founder of Fanbytes.
Money does make you happier. Quadrillion %.
A multi-millionaire from 27.
We're living on a council estate. There was this forced independence. We raised 2 million from investors. We got the business to like 13 million in sales. Hustling has become demonized. There are certain seasons where you have to go in. And I have never met a genuinely successful person to...
Hello, we have the amazing Timothy Armoo on today. Thank you for coming.
Hello.
We actually have known each other now for the last, what do you say, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, like 2 years.
2 years. And you obviously have been game-changing in the world of being an entrepreneur, building and selling a business, becoming a multi-millionaire before you were 27, not 25, like I wanted to say. And I feel like it's super interesting that people can hear from you on your journey when it comes to wealth. And we over here on The Break, we look at wealth from a fully rounded perspective because it's not just about the money, even though we care about the money. But I want to know your take on it. Also, point made, we have to talk about this. You just told me you crashed your new Tesla.
That's the way we started it?
Yeah,
Okay,
we're starting.
sweet.
What had happened? What happened?
I was coming from a wedding and I was coming... This is why I don't use private parking spaces and I leave the cars on the street and I take the risk of getting a ticket because I was coming from this tight parking space. I turned and I basically like the side of my Tesla went to a pillar and I was in that awkward phase where it's like, I can't go forward because it'll cause more scratches and I can't go backwards because it'll cause more scratches. So I just had to call someone and just be like, here's a video. What should I do at this very moment?
Yeah.
Because this is my first car.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know what I was going to do. So anyway, that's what happened. And so I crashed it and I actually drove here with it and I was like, ugh. But it's just like scratches on the left side. It's just like, ugh.
Oh, God.
But anyway, it's getting fixed tomorrow. So.
Okay, I feel bad for you. But do you know what's funny? You built a multi-million-pound business, but you didn't learn to drive till literally 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Priorities.
And also, do you know what? I started learning to drive and then I just thought, what is the most important thing? And it was building the business at that point. And so I just put all my efforts into that. It's kind of funny. I didn't know how to drive until 6 months ago. I'm still now learning to swim, right?
Okay.
So that's another one. I'm basically living life backwards a bit.
So making your millions and then doing the stuff that people usually do when they're like 18.
I guess so. It's kind of like trying to define what my 20s should be about. And, you know, like people say, okay, you know, by 17, 18, learn to drive, learn to swim, learn to do this and to do that. I kind of saw it as like in my 20s, I should do everything I can to almost set the right foundation for the rest of my life. And for me, actually a big part of that foundation was kind of ticking the wealth box. And then I was like, well, when I do that, then I can have all the time to learn to swim, to travel, to do all the things that people do in the early 20s.
You seem to operate from a different perspective than what everybody else operates at or how we're told to operate. Like, do that, whatever. But what makes you think that you had to approach it in a different way?
I think not having brothers and sisters really helped me.
You're an only child?
Yeah.
Really?
How did you not know this? Oh my God.
Oh, sorry. Should I know this? Oh, gosh. Okay.
Well, maybe you shouldn't. I don't really talk about it. But yeah, I'm an only child. And I basically had to like raise myself because I grew up with my dad in our flat. And he was obviously at work the whole time. Yeah. And so I think I got left to my own devices a lot about what to read, how to think, that sort of thing. And so to me, I guess because of that, I kind of crafted my own narrative, right? And it's interesting, right? Because when I was a kid, I used to really hate the fact that I didn't have both my mom and my dad living together. I hated the fact that I spent my first 10 years in Ghana. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I was just like, oh man, my parents are in London and I'm in Ghana with my grandmother. And I'm just like, oh, this is whack, right? And then I'm coming to South London. I'm living in Old Kent Road with my dad. And I'm like, oh, this just sucks, right? Because we're living on a council estate in Old Kent Road. I'm like, oh, this sucks. But then, funny enough, all of that stuff almost forced me to be independent and then come up with my own narrative of like how I should live my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so no one was dictating it to you.
Yeah.
Especially growing up. I find this actually happens with people when they grow up with older parents or grandparents who aren't really the most like over you because, you know, they're old. Like they got stuff to do, right? So it gives you that kind of sense of freedom.
Yeah. And it gives you that sense of more responsibility. Because you're right, like my dad and my mum. So my dad was 40 when he had me. My mum was 38.
Okay, wow.
And so like quite old. And I didn't live with them, as I said, for quite a while. So there was this forced independence. But it's funny, right? Because some of the other things that I've missed out on, like for example, I genuinely don't know what happens in Harry Potter.
I've not watched Harry Potter.
Well, there you go. All right. You and me both. And I've never watched Lord of the Rings. People talk about these TV shows. I'm like, what are you talking about? I still don't know what Tracy Beaker is, right? So
That's
there's all
sacrilege.
these things.
You missed out. You missed out on a little bit of a childhood there.
But there's all these things that I just don't know because like A, I grew up in Ghana, and B, I just didn't watch them because I almost didn't have like a conventional childhood. So that was something that I hated at that point, but now I love it.
Do you feel like there's part of you that wants to like relive a bit of your childhood now that you've got stuff together?
So I am 100% reliving my childhood now. There's this meme where I think it's a TikTok or YouTube meme where the person goes, I just want to do hood rat shit with my friends, right? Like, that's me.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like racing cars, I go to a summer camp every single year where we do like crazy stuff like abseiling and capture the flag and all of that stuff. Going to Japan and just hanging out with a bunch of Japanese folk, going to Nepal and just going up Everest. Just like those sort of things where you're like, man, if I was a kid again, these are the things I'd do. That's really what I'm doing now.
I call that being in your outside era. And funny enough, last year was my outside era as well, which people noticed because maybe a bit similarly, I did all the things that I meant to do.
Yeah.
Bought the house, got married, had the kids, you know, done all of that. I was like, I really don't have any fun. So last year was the year, and this year, and actually for the rest of my life, I'm like, no, I'm going to enjoy because life is about having that as well. And it's something that I think is an aspect of wealth, like enjoyments, fun is part of being wealthy. And don't put age on it because sometimes people are like, Patricia, at your age, should you really be doing that?
Really?
Like, yeah. Like, oh, why are you wearing that at that age? Because I want to. I just got 3 new tattoos. People are like, why she got a tattoo in her 30s? Like, because I feel like it. Why not? People do judge you based on age and what you should or shouldn't be doing. But clearly, you learning to drive at 29.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm side-eyeing, but, you know, you did other things that is funny. Far more valuable.
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from? This you should do this at a certain age. Where do you think that comes from?
Society, benchmarks, the government. Maybe
government.
I feel like it's a government mission.
Giving
like
conspiracy theory.
I feel like there's some conspiracy because they want you to give your best years like at a certain time, and then you're too decrepit to do other things.
Okay.
Maybe. Would you agree or disagree?
Just saying, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. But I would agree. Well, if you assume that the government is made of people and people are part of society and society wants people to just work really hard to give back to the economy, then yeah, I agree with you on that. What I would say is there's this idea that a lot of people are zombieing their way through life, right? And they're zombieing their way through life because someone said, you should do this, you should do that. And they never kind of lift their heads up to question whether what they're doing is right, or more importantly, whether what they're doing actually serves them. And en masse, I think that is what I guess we as a society are so used to. In fact, I would say that I did this very early on, and sometimes I still do it. Like, I don't think I should have gone to university, right? But I did.
It's a discussion.
It's a discussion.
I agree.
So I spent 5 years at university doing a 3-year degree because basically I took a year out before I started. Then I did a philosophy degree. And then basically like 6 weeks in, I realized, oh, this is absolute crap. I don't know why I'm doing this. And then, but because I had already started and I didn't want to like leave and come back, I basically just did a year of that. And then I then moved to then my actual degree, which was a computer science degree. So it took me 5 years to basically do a 3-year degree. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I knew internally, I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not for me. I did start my company in university, but also I was like, I'm doing this because I feel like I have to do this. And that really got to me. Even when I graduated, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm definitely never, ever going to use this thing. But I still felt like I had to do it. And you can imagine how that transfers into marriages, to relationships, to what you should do as a career, etc. So I'm guilty of it, even though I'm saying people are guilty of it.
Yeah. Is it because you felt pressure from your family or just general societies? Like, you need to go to university, you need a computer science degree.
Yeah.
Like, that's what everyone, no diss, but a lot of people do get that as a degree now.
You know what? I think it was fear. I think it was fear. I think it was that I didn't back myself enough at the beginning. Because even before Fanbytes, which I started at 21, I had a different business which I built and sold at 17. So I already had a win and I knew that I could do it, but I still didn't back myself enough to basically go off the well-trodden path of go to university, etc. In fact, there was even 2 weeks. I remember this so very clearly. There were 2 weeks that a bunch of my friends were going to spring weeks. So they were all going to Goldman, JP Morgan, blah, blah. And literally for 2 weeks, I was doing applications. And I was like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But literally, as I was doing the application, I was like, why am I doing this? And it was because when everyone was talking about going to this internship and doing this and doing that, I didn't have anything to talk about. And so because of that, I felt very left out and I felt like I've got to do this. And then I actually spoke with a friend of mine who is now at Goldman or something. And he said, Timo, this isn't you, bro, right? Like, he knew this wasn't me. I knew it wasn't me. And I think that he needed that external person to also say, brother, this path ain't for you. And then I thought, you know what? Yes, you're right. I'm an entrepreneurial person. I enjoy being entrepreneurial. I enjoy building businesses. I'm just going to do that.
Excellent. So do you feel then some people are made a certain way? Like, I feel like some people are like for that life and some people think they're for that life, but really they can't handle it.
What life? Like the entrepreneur life?
Entrepreneur life, working for yourself life, that like, I'm going to fail, I'm going to mess up and I'm going to get back up again. And I don't need the security of what society brings every time to help me. They back themselves.
I don't think necessarily you are born a certain way, because I think at the beginning I backed myself and then I didn't back myself. And then I went back to backing myself.
Why? What happened?
I think that I felt a few failures at certain points in my life that really knocked me. So after I sold the Entrepreneur Express, which was like an online media business, I sold that at 17. And to give some context, it was something I started at 17. And then literally 11 months afterwards, I get approached by this American company to buy it. And it's like, it's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but at 17, living in a council estate, someone offered me 110 grand to buy something I was working on for 11 months. I'm like, yo, take it, right?
Yeah.
But then right afterwards, what happened was I started a bunch of businesses which all failed. And they all failed because of like ego. I was like, well, I've done it in a very short amount of time on a small scale. I'm going to do it on a bigger scale. But they all failed because they weren't actually like good businesses. But I thought I could make it happen. And I think those 2 failures really rocked me. And it just made me feel like, oh, maybe you're not that guy as you thought you were. Now in hindsight, having now done businesses and sold a few more and helped friends sell theirs, I'm like, oh, well, every single person, like literally after this, I'm going to friend's launch party of his new company. His prior company, he sold to Capital One for 300 million, right? Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
I'm in the wrong business.
He sold for 300 million. And in fact, actually on Friday, I'm also going to a celebration party of my friend Hussein, who founded this company called Onfido. That just got announced. It got sold for like 656 million, right? All of these people, even though you see that business, they also had 10 other businesses which all failed.
Wow.
Right? And now that I meet more people and now that I meet other entrepreneurs, I'm like, oh yeah, every single person had basically like slight success and then failure, and then slight more success and then failure, and then big success.
Okay.
And that rocked me at the beginning because I thought, oh, well, obviously I'm meant to be successful. So if I fail, what does that say about me? So that's why I felt like at the beginning I had a lot of belief and then I lacked belief and then I had a lot more belief.
Okay, I love that. Failure is part of this journey for success. So do you think failure adds to someone's wealth?
I think failure adds a good understanding of what not to do. And actually, a big part of knowing what to do is knowing what not to do. Right. So, having started a bunch of businesses which didn't work, I now know the characteristics of businesses that don't work, which therefore means I'm almost like eliminating my chances of failure, which mean by definition, I have more chances of success. You know what I mean?
How do people, though, not allow the failures to actually rock their world, like, and give up? Because I feel like a lot of people, once they fail, they're like, no, I can't do this anymore.
So, there's a post I made on Instagram which people really liked where I said, you are the driver, not the car. So if you're driving a car and the car, let's say, has a flat tire, you don't look at that flat tire and go, oh, that makes me a terrible driver. You just go, oh, like there was something wrong with the car. Let me go and get the car fixed and then get on with it. And I think that is similar to the idea of business, which is sometimes business goes wrong and it's not you. It's not saying that you are a bad person. It just means, like, for example, the business is a bad business. But the other thing that's most important, and I've just come to really realize this with like so many of my friends that I meet and just like doing more business stuff, is business is legitimately a skill. So as with any skill, you get better the more reps that you put in.
Yeah.
So if you look at my history of business, like the first time I ever tried any business was at 14, right? That was a tutoring business. That business failed, but I learned about, oh, this is how you ask people for money. Oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I started something at 17 and it was like, oh, this is how this online marketing world works. Okay, that's interesting. I'm going to now take the sales thing I learned from the previous business and then this marketing thing that I learned. And then when it came to Fanbytes, it was like, okay, I now get online marketing. I now get sales. I'm not going to pair it up with like management. I'm not going to pair it up with fundraising. I'm not going to pair it up with this. And then it culminates in like, I'm now going to understand how to sell a business. But if from the jump I had said, boom, 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 I should know all these skills, there is no way I would have been successful.
That's so true. People think that you have it all at once, but the reality, it takes time to build that skill set to actually become successful in the long run. You made a point. You said there's a problem with the car and not you as the driver. But in a world of social media, where you are the brand, you are the product, and people who are trying to build their online personas and their individual brand, how do you not take it personally? Because
that's so difficult.
When my content flops, or when I'm being cancelled, or when I have to show up, I'm like, they hate me. I feel a certain way about myself, and it's very difficult for, I think, most people to separate themselves from that online image.
This is a very, 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 very good question, but it's also a very, very hard question because you're right. Like, if you are the product and people have problems with the product, then you have problems with you.
Right.
So I don't have a definite answer for it, but the answer that I would think about is trying to detach yourself from the outcome, which is extremely hard. And I know it sounds incredibly easy, right? Like, oh yeah, detach yourself. I don't know how you do that if you're the actual product. One of the things, because I've obviously started putting out content a lot, and sometimes people would also say things, and I'm like, I want to destroy you in the comments right now. But then I'd go, in 48 hours, in fact, in 24 hours, this person is not going to remember me. And I'm also not going to remember the person if I decide to. So if that's the case, then this doesn't matter. I literally tell myself, like, I like talk to myself and I say, in 24 hours, none of this is going to matter. And that happened when there was a post I made where I said, Think and Grow Rich, that book is a fraud. All right. It was actually like complete lies. And this is proven, by the way, like it is complete lies. It was just made up by someone who wanted to sell
Explain.
books. So the book, Think and Grow Rich, is written by Napoleon Hill, right? But Napoleon Hill never actually met Carnegie. And actually, he was funded by this guy called W.H. Clements. And W.H. Clements was like a business person who then believed a lot in like positive affirmation and self-image and stuff. So he basically was like, oh, Napoleon Hill, we're going to get you That's not actually even his real name, by the way.
Like me.
There you go. So we're going to get you to basically publish this book saying that you spoke to the richest man in the world and like these are his secrets. It's like if Jeff Bezos died or Elon Musk died and then we just wrote a book and said like these are the teachings of Elon Musk. Of course, it's going to sell because everybody wants to know his teachings, but it's just like complete fiction.
Okay.
So I wrote that and people are like, people are coming for me, right? And the reason why is because like in the video, I'm like attacking something they firmly believe in.
Yeah.
Like they believe in that book. And I'm like, yeah, this whole thing was a lie. And they're like, who are you? You're a nobody, da-da-da. And several times I just wanted to just go crazy and be like Google me, bitch. Or like, do you know who the fuck just go crazy? But then I thought, you know what? Literally in 24 hours, this guy is going to forget me. And I'm also going to forget him. So in all these cases, that's not going to matter.
Yeah, you're giving I'm the bigger person. Do you know what? Sometimes I just go wild.
Yeah,
I'm going to be petty and I'm going to say something. And actually, I've become more apologetic. Not like your subject that you just talked about, but I did a cooking video. I was cooking a light soup and like a little combination, and people are so aggressive about how you should cut an onion, how you should fry the soup, how you should do the tomatoes. And there was like 1,000 comments about the way in which I prepared my meal, whether or not you should wash meat or not. And at some point in time, I was like, you know what? I was typing, I was aggressively responding to people. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be the bigger person today. And I felt great about it.
So, do you know what? Sometimes you do have to stand on business, right? Sometimes you have to stand on business. But you also have to realize that by, like who you blame is the person that you give power to, right? So sometimes I'm like, oh, my day's ruined because of that comment. But then that means that waste man basically has control over my feelings.
Yeah.
And that feeling of someone else having control over your feelings is not a feeling that you want.
Yeah. But you get some like dopamine release. Like I don't always have to be the bigger person.
That's true.
Sometimes I want to be petty and I'm gonna do that. Okay. So prior to building Fanbytes, what did wealth look like to you? And how is it different now that you have, accomplished so much?
Wealth to me before Fanbytes was purely financial because I was a poor black kid growing up in South London. And I did not want to be that kid anymore. Yeah. And so to me, growing a business and selling a business was my way out of that. And I was very honest about that. I was honest about that to my employees. I was honest about that to investors. I was honest about that to anyone that would ask. Having now ticked that box, I'd say wealth is two things. One, I still think that it does hold a big financial component, 100%. But I also think it's about choice. It's about choosing the people that you want to spend life with. And that involves from a work setting, but also from a personal setting. And then the third thing is how you want to spend your time. Now, I don't think that it needed me to have sold my company in order to have understood that definition of wealth. I think I could have gone into the game understanding those are the three things that matter. And do you know what? I think I would have enjoyed the journey a lot more. I don't think I enjoyed the journey of building Fanbytes because I built it with a destination, like the destination is, and then we'll sell it. Rather than almost the joy is in the people that I'm building it with and what I'm choosing to do with my time.
Do you know, I hear this all the time, right? I hear this line from people who have then made it. They're like, I know. You did hustle. You did give up everything. You did literally work all the hours. And that's how you became successful. Yeah. And then everyone's like, money don't matter. Or,
no, relax. Money matters.
Okay.
So, like, I completely agree with you. Two things. Number one, money matters. Number two, money does make you happier. Like 100 categorically, like quadrillion %. Yeah. When I say that it is about the time and enjoying the time, it is during the process of building the company, I had to learn a lot of different things, right? We raised 2 million from investors. We got the business to like 13 million in sales in the year before we saw like all of these things. And I was just so caught like in the moment of doing it that I should have actually like gone, oh, wow, I'm going to enjoy the process of doing this. I'm going to document this and like really enjoy it Whereas it just felt like this painful thing. So 100%, I do not in any way regret like the sacrifices I made, the hours I put, the tunnel vision that I had. But I do think that if I had then celebrated the small wins on the way, that would have been better than basically me for 6 years, basically being like, I'm going to go through this very painful thing and then I'm going to celebrate the big win.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I feel like I've come to the conclusion that creating anything super successful is going to be a little bit painful. No, it's going to be
Yeah.
a lot painful in that very beginning or through the journey, but then you have to find glimmers of things that you enjoy throughout it. But I think you can't like dance and enjoy your way to like major successes like what you've done.
So I think that the reason it's painful is because you may not know whether it's going to work. That's actually the reason why the sense of self-doubt. Because if you think about it, if you knew categorically that everything you were going to do was going to work, it wouldn't feel painful.
Ooh.
You'd feel very joyful. You'd be like, oh, my money's waiting for me at the end of this. But it's the uncertainty that makes it painful. And so if you're comfortable with uncertainty and you back yourself enough to know that if I flip this coin, 9 times out of 10, it will end up on what I want it to be, and the odds are in my favor, then you can approach it in a much more joyful way rather than it being painful.
I love that. How can one have more certainty then? Like, life doesn't give you guarantees, but do you have any tips or advice for people to build that as a muscle?
The first thing would be to start very, very small. Because if you imagine business is a skill that you get better at over time, then you want to start very small businesses which prove to you that you can run some sort of business, and then over time you just build bigger and bigger businesses. The challenge is that people's first businesses, they all have these dreams of building like $1 billion business, and then they go, oh, that proves I'm a bad entrepreneur because I wasn't able to do it. So if you have enough evidence of in your past of you being able to have done really, really good stuff, then when you come to face a big thing, you have all these stories. It's like, I'm sure with you, your first ever video that you posted, you didn't go, oh yeah, I'm just going to be this super person. You were perhaps a bit scared, a bit anxious, a bit nervous. And then over time, as you just had more reps, hundreds of videos, thousands of videos, people commenting, then you eventually became the Patricia Bright that we know now. And that's a very similar thing with business and in life. And then I think the second most important thing is, you know, there's this African saying, and I'm sure you've heard it from your mom, which is, do they have two heads?
Yes. Do they have two heads? I like this one. Yes.
And do they have two heads is such a great saying because it really brings home the fact that you are no different to another person. And if another person can do it, then why can't you? And so for me, one of the reasons why I built a lot of belief was because when I was coming up in Fanbytes, there was this blog I read called Retire at 21. And it basically showed a bunch of 20-something-year-olds who were making money online. And I thought, there is nothing different between us two. So if there's nothing different between us two, then if you can do it, then I can do it.
100%.
So those two things are the reasons, and those two things are the frameworks I use to build enough evidence so that you don't have that self-doubt in you.
I love that. You've spoken about luck in regarding to Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. Tell me more about your idea around luck.
So when I was first getting into business and I'd listened to a lot of successful people talk about how they became successful, they say I got lucky. And I used to hate that because I was like, no, just tell me the actual thing that you did. Stop gatekeeping. That was the thing for me. These guys were gatekeeping. And then I realized that actually there were a few things in my life and in my business life that I got lucky with. The first one is I got lucky finding the right co-founders. So I had two co-founders, my COO, Ambrose, and my CTO, Mitchell. Ambrose I met at a random leadership event I wasn't even going to go to. And then I just randomly started talking to him and we bonded over books. Mitchell I met because some random guy who I had met ages ago, I asked him, who is the best like technical person that you know? And then he introduced me to Mitchell. We got lucky because our first ever investor was actually someone who I wanted to work for his company, but then he said, no, don't work for me, but let me invest in your next business. And then the third one is we kind of got lucky even with the sale. And I'll tell you why. The reason why was because the company that eventually ended up buying Fanbytes, Brain Labs, really great company. But how I actually got to know them was because a friend of mine who I went to the same school with actually worked for the private equity firm that backed Brain Labs. And randomly, he came to my house and I was talking about like sale and all that stuff. And he says, oh, actually, this could be interesting because we're looking at that with Brain Labs. And then we introduced our M&A banker to them, and then the whole process ran. But one commonality amongst all of those things is that I had to put myself in certain situations to create the luck.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my view on luck, is that luck definitely does exist. But if you put yourself out there enough, what you do is you're like increasing the surface area for luck.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you're then going to be ahead of people who don't actually put themselves out there. So the lesson from that is not, okay, like, if I close my eyes and I wish enough, I would be lucky. It is actually more, how do I put myself out there in a bunch of different environments and settings to increase my surface area of luck?
Yeah. On top of that, it sounds to me like you have a wealthy network, because everything you just mentioned involved other people.
Yeah.
You met your co-founders, someone introduced you, you know this person, they were at your school. What does relationships look like in your kind of world?
So I think at the beginning, I thought that business relationships were purely transactional. They were purely, what do you have for me? And then what can I help you with? And then that was it. Until I think I started to really understand that at the end of every business transaction is a person.
Yeah.
And it's not a spreadsheet, it's not some data point on a computer, it's a person. And so how can you genuinely build friendships and relationships with the people that you come across in business? Now, having said all of this, I would say that I have been quite intentional about how I build friendships in business. So here's the very specific way I have built a pretty strong network. If I want to be friends with someone, or I want to form a relationship with them, I will study them for like 3 days. And by
That's a stalker-ish type behavior.
yeah, probably, but it's work. I will look at the LinkedIn, I look at the Twitter, I look at the Instagram. I like try and understand what they are interested in beyond just business, and more importantly, what I think I could genuinely help them with. So, for example, the way I've built a lot of my friends who I'd say are over 50 is I've understood that, so many of them are running interesting companies or investing in companies, but they don't understand, say, how social media is going to affect their businesses, or how influencers are going to affect their businesses, or how Gen Z are thinking. So often I would then reach out to them and say, hey, I saw you post this thing. Here is an article that could help. So I saw you post this thing. You should do this. Or here's an insight, blah, blah, blah. And instantly I've come off by helping them with a very specific thing. And then off the back of that, they'd be like, okay, this is a young guy who is of value, because that is definitely true. I think the moment that you start playing in the big wealth circles, it is a game of like, how can you contribute value? But it's not, how can I take from you and how can you take from me? It's like, how can we come together to build something bigger? So even after Fanbytes, this is actually a very interesting story. After Fanbytes, I just sold another business, and it was a business I was on the board of. The news is going to come out probably in the next 2 months or 6 weeks. But basically how I got to know that person was because he had seen a lot of my Instagram videos. We had become friends. And then he said he's interested in selling his business. He'd been running it for 10 years. And so what then I said is, all right, cool. Let's see how we can do it. So I sat with him, packaged up the business, thought about how we can bring in a management team, thought about all of that stuff. And then a business that was doing 2.5 million a year, which after 10 years is not a whole lot, we just sold for 21 million. And that was because of like an Instagram DM that we just became friends. But there was a transaction involved, but we vibed as well. Like we went axe throwing, we went racing,
That's
and we
what
became
you keep
friends.
asking me to do,
Yeah.
axe throwing.
So you should come axe throwing, it's great. But that's a very good example of how it like started off maybe relatively, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? And then we ended up becoming friends. And then we ended up building something bigger, which is like the sale of his business, where I win and he won, rather than this, what can I do for you and what can you do for me?
That is insane. So millions can be made in the DMs.
In the DMs.
That is a real
That's
thing.
the takeaway you took from this? Okay.
That is what I took from
Okay.
it. I mean, my DMs don't look like your DMs then. Actually, I was going to say something I shouldn't say because sometimes my DMs look a little bit crazy, but that is because I am a female. So interesting. Okay. You shared a post with a tongue-in-cheek caption which said, people who warn you about hustle culture should also warn you about poverty. What was that about?
You really went into the archives.
We did.
I believe that if you're trying to achieve something of any significance, you need to put in a lot of effort. And not even a lot of effort, you need to put in outsized effort compared to what other people are going to do. And I think what's happened, especially with social media, is hustling and working intensely hard for a short period of time has become demonized. It's like, you should take care of your mental health. And look, you should 100% take care of your mental health, but there are seasons, right?
Yeah.
There are certain seasons where you have to go in and you have to be comfortable with the idea of going in. And I have never, ever met a genuinely successful person who has understood the sacrifices to then tell you, no, take it easy. I have never met someone who does that. And often the people who say that are people who are trying to sell you courses on work-life balance. And work-life balance, if you're trying to build something significant, it could be trying to be the best at your job. It could be trying to be the best at your business. Work-life balance doesn't really exist, especially at the beginning. You have to be intense about your mission. And then once you've really focused on it and once you've given yourself enough of a gap, that's at that point where you can perhaps take your foot a bit off the pedal.
Yeah. This concept of using every hour that you have to build something in the beginning and it's hard work is actually the truth. And as much as people hate to hear that hard work plays a role, it is just part of the process. And I don't think everyone is made for that necessarily. Do you think that, you know, some people are just made differently? Like Beyonce is made a certain way and she does what she does and you do what you do.
So often when you talk about hard work, people then say, well, smart work is better than hard work. And I hate that reply. The reason I hate that reply is because inherent in that, I feel is some sort of cop-out, which says that you don't need volume at the beginning. And I genuinely believe that, especially at the beginning, you just need to put in more time, more volume, more reps. I do think this can be trained. So you give the example of Beyonce. And we know about her alter ego, Sasha Fierce, right?
Yeah. Why do you know about her alter ego, Sasha Fierce? We love Sasha.
Because I studied alter egos.
Oh.
During my business, I studied basically how people are able to break through their mental barrier to get to a different level. And I found that so many of them, they just invent a new character who they are. So for example, Kobe Bryant did this a lot, right? He called himself the Black Mamba when he got onto the court. And funny enough, I actually also did the same thing. So there's actually an inflection point where I was called Timothy and then I started to go Timo. And I was very conscious about basically designing a character called Timo.
Wow.
And that came because I was doing a public speaking event and it was the biggest one I'd done at that point. It was like in front of, I would say, 4,000 people. And before I was going on stage, I was incredibly nervous. I was like very, very nervous. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be quite painful. This is not going to be great. And then I thought to myself, there is someone who's speaking to 4,000 people is nothing because they're used to speaking to 40,000 people.
Yeah.
And so who is that person? Can I construct that person? And then I remember as I was thinking that, the guy came to me and said, oh, we're about to introduce you in 5 minutes. What do you want us to introduce you as? And then I said, Timo. And that was the first time that I said Timo. And the reason why was because at that point I went, all right, Timo is this confident guy who's speaking to 4,000 people, is nothing, who goes on stage, who absolutely smashes it. And he said, all right, Timo Armoo. And I remember I went on and I smashed it. Like I smashed it. I actually ended up having a standing ovation at the end of it. And I was talking about marketing, right?
Wow.
And I had a standing ovation after this. And the reason why is because I tapped into my alter ego. And I believe that every single person, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you're a non-entrepreneur, there is a version of you, which is the version, which is the unbreakable, which is the version, which is what you want to be. And the truth is, your current self, because it's got so much baggage and experiences, may not be able to break through to that new plane. So the way that you do that is like you invent a new person, and that person is the person that gets on that plane. So when you're doing your presentation, when you want to talk to that new person, it's like, what would that alter ego do? And then you go be that alter ego.
Yeah. This is basically visualization.
100%.
Visualization, manifestation, that kind of vibe. The same way, as I told you, my name is not Patricia Bright, but I definitely get into Patricia Bright mode once the cameras come on. And I shared this, that I have another alter ego, Patrice Briggs.
What is that?
That is when I'm outside, I'm Patrice.
Tell me more about who
Patrice
this new character
is. More like that girl, she's having a good time. Patrice gets the new tattoos. Patrice is like
incredible.
A different vibe where I don't want to be. Because it's like a twist on Bright.
Yeah, but like, why Briggs? Briggs sounds like a 90s rapper, like a cool, edgy 90s rapper.
Well, maybe that's what she does on a weekend. Patrice Briggs is rapping for the people.
Okay.
So yeah, I love that concept around alter egos. And maybe sometimes people do it, but they don't realize they're doing it. They haven't named that as a strategy that works for them moving forward.
Yeah, everyone has that little voice in their head. And if you maybe sometimes paid attention to that voice and you thought about how we can magnify the good things about that voice, it's kind of crazy how your life can change.
What was it like on the 3rd of May 2022 when you saw your bank balance change? You sold the company, and I'm sure it went from a certain amount of zeros to like extra zeros.
So the truth is, it went from 000 to not 000. The reason why is because I opened up a fresh new bank account.
Ooh, why?
So the actual reason is because before the sale of the company, I was on Monzo and Starlin. And I basically said, there is no way at all these men are going to allow like millions and millions of pounds to go into a bank account all of a sudden. I was very scared about that. So I ended up getting like a very stable bank. I got a Santander bank.
Oh yeah, Santander. Shout out to Santander. Yeah. Maybe you will sponsor us one day.
Maybe. When we sold the company and the money arrived in the bank account, there were two main feelings. One was, oh my God, I can't believe this is me. It was this sense of, I actually have a 5-minute video on my phone because I recorded the whole thing of me just saying, wow, just wow, 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 wow. Just kept saying it. The other thing was, of course, this is me. Of course, this was going to happen.
That's Timo coming out.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So it's very interesting because in some weird way, I felt imposter syndrome at the pinnacle of the thing which I always wanted to do. I felt like, is this really happening? That's actually the reason why I video recorded it to myself, because I thought if I don't record this, I'm not going to be able to believe myself that it happened.
Yeah.
And then the other one was, of course it's meant to happen because this is how I designed it to be. I think this is something that anyone in any profession, at any part of life, when you have something that you've been striving for a very long period of time, you would have these opposing thoughts where it'd be almost a sense of, wow, I can't believe this happened. But then that side of you, which is that self-belief side of you, would always then say, of course this happened, right? And you want to lean more into the second one, right? Of course this was going to happen. Of course I was going to be able to buy that house. This was the house I designed. Of course I was going to get that job because like I deserve that job.
Yeah. And
really leaning into that second part is always something I advise people to do.
I feel like I've naturally done that, but I think people think I'm cocky because of it.
Interesting.
Like, there's a thing, and I've always said this to everyone, like I knew that I'm going to be successful. It's almost like, oh, it's innate. I could have no food on my plate right now, but I know that I'm going to have a gourmet meal. Like, I just know that I know. And it's like, you can't tell me otherwise. But that can come across as being like arrogant, but it is what it is sometimes.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? I get that same sentiment from people who are not successful.
Delusion. Okay, explain.
No, I mean, like, I get sometimes people saying I'm cocky, but the people who saying that are not successful. When you were saying, I was thinking about the Kanye West documentary, Genius, and about how if you watch that whole documentary, it's like the guy who was recording knew Kanye was going to be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And Kanye himself knew he was going to be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I just finished reading this book called Profiles of Power. And they document people like Murdoch, Napoleon, Michael Jordan, 50 Cent, Jay-Z. And what you do see in all their threads is that even from young, they had this certainty that they were going to win. And I think you can brainwash yourself to do that.
Right.
You can legitimately brainwash yourself to believe in a reality where the only logical conclusion is that at the end of the story, you are the winner.
Yeah. I love that.
And that's probably something that you have done. And I did that, I think, at the beginning of Fanbytes.
Mm-hmm.
A few days before, there was an article that had come out about Fanbytes. And, typical Ghanaian dad, he was like, I don't know what you're even doing, but I'm proud of you anyway,
Oh,
right?
Amazing.
And he said, I'm proud of you, and I know this is going to be a success. And then 2 days afterwards, he passes away. And I remember throughout the entirety of Fanbytes, anytime it got hard, I just believed in the fact that this business was going to be a successful acquisition because I had promised my dad this was going to happen.
Wow.
And so it's interesting, when I spoke in front of the entire company, when we sold the company, yes, I spoke about the logic for the acquisition, etc. But I finished off with saying another reason why this had to be successful is because 6 years ago in my dad's room, I told him this was going to be a success. So this had no other logical conclusion. So when you have that sense of certainty, which I believe you can brainwash yourself to do, which I believe, like, because of my dad's passing, I almost brainwashed myself to say, this story ends in only one way and there's no other way. When you brainwash yourself to do that, you just walk around with this sense of bravado, which some people may think is cockiness or some people may think is arrogance, but it's just such certainty and confidence in self that it can also be off-putting to others. It can look like, why are you nervous? Because I'm nervous, right? Why aren't you scared? Because I'm scared.
Yeah.
But it's like, you should be scared, but you choose not to be scared.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big mindset shift.
Yeah. Are you spiritual at all?
I'm not. I know all the aunties would be like, no, my son. My son.
I'm still praying for you. Don't worry. I got you.
I'm still praying for you about my son. Yeah.
No, I'm spiritual though. And I think that's where some of my
Interesting
cockiness and belief comes from, whether or not you believe in God or the universe or whatever. But sometimes when you feel like God is on your side or the universe is on the side, that is then where I have some of my delulu behaviors that I'm like, why wouldn't that work for me? And I saw that in the life of my mum, who categorically should not be successful. Everything on paper says, no way. Like, she didn't go to secondary school. She's got her own issues. She is uneducated, blah, blah, blah. But like, she's the first person I knew who made $1 million and or owned property and did that. And it's like, you barely speak English. Like, come on. I'm like, why do people like you? And it's like, just God. I'm like, really? Does that really work for you? So it made me a little bit delusional. And I quite like that concept of brainwashing myself, be that from a spiritual perspective or something else, that it means I know that I am inherently going to be successful. But you have to put in the work as well. I'm not going to be like, I'm going to be successful. Sit down and like look to the stars to like help me, or check my astrology like signs or anything like that.
Where else do you think, because you've spoken about Christianity being a foundation for your delusion, even though I see it more as for your certainty. Where else do you think people can get that from apart from religion?
I think people might need to learn to tap into the source of self. So versus looking from external sources for success or validation, it's learning to sit alone with yourself, finding out where your strengths are, what your gifts are, leaning into them, and then believing in them. And you then will believe in them by nurturing them. So testing them out. So, I'm a good singer. Like, I'm actually going to go and, go to singing club or go and put myself out there and do, pubs and little things just to test my model. And the more that you do that, the more you believe in your ability.
That's really interesting. And so to the person who says, I don't know what my strengths are, What would you say?
I think you need to take time to think about, well, actually, I think often people tell you what your strengths are over and over
Oh,
again.
interesting. Okay.
So like why I'm doing this is because my strength is I'm very conversational. It's just like people have told me things I say have impacted them over my life. It's like, oh, I speak and things happen for others, not necessarily me, but like it's a thing. So I think you can get that from external sources, but I feel like people know what they're good at. Don't you think?
Actually, I'm going to ask you again, during your content creator journey, right, from all the days on YouTube, at what point do you think that it clicked for you?
It's never clicked for me.
Okay.
It doesn't click.
Tell me more.
What's the definition of clicking, right? That clicking that I'm good at this.
Yeah.
It's never clicks. I never have a moment of thinking, oh yeah, I'm here, I've made it. My motivation is just keep doing. So I'm motivated solely by do something versus do nothing. So like I have to create from within myself because I feel like I have to do something. I have to create. That's my motivation, not the YouTube itself, not the content itself, not the audience itself. Just I must produce. That's it.
That's interesting. And do you think that feeling is something that can be trained in people, or do you think that's an innate thing?
For me, that's just something I do. I wish I could be less like that, to be fair, sometimes.
You wish you could be less
like how I am in terms of
That's
like,
interesting.
why do I always feel like I have to keep producing? Why can't I just settle in nothing?
Right.
I'm not. But I think that most people feel like they naturally have to create, but they maybe suppress that.
Because
it's hard.
It's hard to
It's hard to challenge yourself, test yourself, fail constantly, and do stuff. Like if you can live in a world where you're distracted and you feel satisfied by the dopamine that you get from being online or chatting to friends or blah, 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 then why would you try and push yourself if you don't need to?
So if you weren't a creator now, what else would you be doing? Let's assume there is no social media.
Yeah.
What else would you do?
I'd still be creating something.
That's interesting.
Like social media didn't make me a creator. I've spoken out at stuff. I've literally been at a pulpit in the past.
Right.
I'm not a minister. I have done hair. I have done women's groups. I've always done things where I'm proactively doing something. I would paint. I would do pottery. And I think this is actually human existence. All of us want to do something. We need to produce something, but we just don't really know the outlet. And I think we all assume that the outlet now has to be social media, but the outlet doesn't have to be social media. It can be anything.
So the social media is like a vehicle for your creativity. It's not the creativity itself.
100% for me right now. And I'm in a place where I now look for other outlets for creativity that aren't on social media because I have a desperate need to output something.
So it's almost like social media now is to the other person is like social media is your job. So you're looking for another channel, same way someone might have a job, but then they're looking for another channel to get their creativity
100%.
out.
What are the wealth gains you've had outside of finances? Because now we know you're rich and successful and fabulous and the zeros are in your account, but where else have you gained wealth?
So I think I've gained wealth in two other areas. One is in the relationships that I've chosen to pursue, not that I had to pursue. That's a very big distinction. There were a few relationships that I felt like I had to be in because of legacy. Like they were my friends, so therefore they stay my friends. But actually, as part of the, I guess, post Fanbytes, post exit, just like prior me, I've had the opportunity to now think about what type of life I want to construct and the type of people that I want to be in that life. And it's not necessarily, I get rid of my friends who don't have money and only hang out with people with money. No, it's more that I now can choose to decide to spend time with people who have the same interests as me, who are able to do the same things as me, and perhaps who have a bit more flexibility in their lives. The second thing, quite frankly, is like mental wealth, which is a bit of an odd phrasing. So the founder of the company that bought Fanbytes said something incredibly profound to me. And he said, people spend so much time going to a physical gym to work on their body, but they don't spend as much time going to a mental gym to work on their mind. And when he said that to me, it really hit me because I care a lot about the gym and working out. But from a mental perspective, I kind of like dot in and dot out, right? When I'm feeling sad, I read a book. When I'm feeling this, blah, blah. But what I did was I literally put myself on what can only be described as a mental MBA. I was like, okay, I want to understand how the brain works.
Right.
Cool. I want to understand how the mind works. I want to understand how I feel about certain things and why I feel about these things.
Yeah.
And so that for me has actually been a big wealth gain because it is relatively rare for someone to have the time to be able to say, I'm just going to spend today reading.
Wow.
And I'm going to read about the mind. I'm going to read about the brain. I'm going to read about psychology. I'm going to read about why I am the way that I am. And I would say that probably has been like the biggest ROI thing post the sale is that it's given me the opportunity to go to the mental gym rather than the physical gym.
Do you feel like you know yourself a lot more now? Then?
Oh my God, so crazily, yes. So, for example, being an only child and then being someone who their parents weren't around that much meant that actually a big thing that drove me in life, and it still drives me, and I'm aware of it, was significance, right? Business to me, now that I think about it, business to me wasn't a game of how much money I can make. It was how significant can I be in the world?
Yeah.
And business was my vehicle for doing that. And so it mattered to me more that Fanbytes was one of the more successful influencer companies. It didn't matter to me the money we made so much. It was more like, if you're talking top 3, I'm in there, right?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
that drove me more. And understanding that has now led to, for example, the way I think about businesses now, or the people that I choose to spend time with now, or what I want to spend my time doing now is if you're driven by significance and achievement, which can be healthy and also unhealthy, if you're driven by that, then you can then decide the type of businesses that you want to pursue rather than just going into any business because it makes money.
I hear you. So obviously you're super successful and you have wealth, but do you feel like in the pursuit of that, there are some areas where you've actually had losses?
So I think I've had 2 main losses. The first one is the depth in relationships. Now I'm just beginning to really hone into that. But I had a lot of relationships with like friends, etc., but they didn't have enough depth. And I am spending time now creating more depth with people. The second thing, I didn't have a conventional 20-something-year-old life. And I'm making up for that now with doing a lot of random stuff. And I would say that sometimes I do think about not having the experiences like going to this party or going here or really enjoying friends' birthdays because I'm always on the phone trying to email and get this deal done. And during those periods, I took pride in it because I was like, I'm always on my grind. But in hindsight now, those things were quite inconsequential. Now, that's not the same as saying I regret it.
Yeah.
I think I postponed it and I knowingly postponed it. And now that I have the time and the resources and everything else, I am now more conscious and actively pursuing it.
I love that. What do you think people should think about when it comes to a wealthy life and something that our audience can take from you in final thoughts?
So I think the main thing is a wealthy life is as you define it. It is not inherently about financial, although that definitely matters. It is also not necessarily about relationships, even though that matters. It is as you define it. And most importantly, a wealthy life can actually change as you grow older.
Yeah.
So to me, in my early 20s, a wealthy life knowingly was 95% financial.
Was there a figure in your head?
10 million.
10 million. Okay.
Yeah. And for me, it was like, okay, this is it. This is everything. This is everything I think about. This is everything that I focus on. In fact, my ex-girlfriend, it's interesting because I found so many different ways to involve her in the business because I was like, this business is all consuming. I love you. And I also love the business. Let's just mesh both of them together. So she worked at Fanbytes on 2 different occasions. And I think that worked because I basically said, this is the most important thing in my life. But now I'm like, okay, business is not the most important thing in my life. Actually, what's the most important thing in my life is myself and creating my new identity.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that all to say that when we think about a wealthy life, it is not necessarily just one thing that is the all-encompassing wealthy life. It can blend at different parts in your life, and do not feel ashamed. Do not feel embarrassed at all to say, at this point, this is my priority. Because at the end of the day, when everyone dies, it's just you who is going to look at how well you lived your life and whether it was your wealthy life.
There we go. I love that. I think that's a great way to end this.
Sick.
Where can people find you online and beyond?
Well, just Google me.
I love that. That's that arrogance we're speaking about. We want it. Just Google me. We'll have some details in the description box and commentary. So thank you for coming on.
Peace. This was fun.